Hello everybody. We were talking about the tissue, and in my last lecture I talked about the epithelial tissue and part of the connective tissue. So we'll finish the rest part of the connective tissue and the muscle tissue and neural tissue. So there are three types of cartilages. Cartilages belong to connective tissue, and I already mentioned that the most common type is the hyaline cartilage, and in which areas or structures of your body you will find the hyaline cartilage. Also I mentioned where you will find the fibrocartilage and elastic cartilage. So in next few slides I'll show you how they look like under the microscope. So this is a hyaline cartilage under the microscope. So in hyaline cartilage you will see that the cell, this is the cell here, and this is the nucleus inside the cell, and the cell is located inside a cavity, and this cavity is called lacunae. Okay, so this is lacunae and this is the cell, chondrocyte. So we can say chondrocyte in lacunae. Okay, remember both in the cartilage and bone, the cells are located inside the lacunae, small cavity. So you see lacunae and the chondrocyte, the cell of cartilage. Chondro means cartilage, and in between the cells lot of matrix. So plenty of matrix in between the lacunae. So this is how the hyaline cartilage looks like. No visible fiber in the matrix. So few cells inside the lacunae and plenty of matrix. Elastic cartilage, you see here, it is kind of opposite. Many cells inside the lacunae. So this is a cell in the elastic cartilage, nucleus here, and this is the lacunae here. Okay, so you see in case of elastic cartilage you have many cells within the lacunae and small amount of matrix. The matrix amount is smaller or less than hyaline because more cells, so space is small between the cells. And in elastic cartilage you will find elastic fibers. You see this thin hair like fibers, elastic fibers. That's why this cartilage has elasticity. You can change the shape. Example, ear. Right? You can easily change the shape, and when you remove the pressure, it will go back to its actual shape. That is the elasticity. Okay. Fibrocartilage, another type of cartilage, and you see the name fibro. That means you have lot of fibers. So here you can see a lot of fibers, blue stained or colored fibers. These are collagen fibers, okay, present heavily inside the tissue, and that's why this tissue or cartilage is very tough. The structure that has a lot of fibers, that structure is tough. So fibrocartilage has a lot of fibers. So you see hyaline has few cells within the lacunae and plenty of matrix, no visible fibers. In elastic cartilage, you have more cells within the lacunae, small amount of matrix and elastic fibers. And in fibrocartilage, you have a lot of fibers. And you see chondrocytes within lacunae. So this is the lacunae, it's the nucleus of the cell. Okay. So those are three types of cartilages, and I have mentioned the locations before. Now we'll see another type of connective tissue structure, that is the bone. Bone is a connective tissue, and if you see the structure of a compact bone, inside the compact bone you will see the round structures. This is a cross section. Remember, this slide is actually a cross section of the compact bone. Actually, the compact bone is formed by many columnar structures, many columns bundled together. Okay, so if you see the compact bone structure like this, okay, many columns are packed together inside the compact bone. Now if I make a cross section slice, I will see circles, right? So each circle is a column, and each column is the structural unit of the bone called osteon. Okay, so each circle here is an osteon. Okay, so osteon. Now if you see the structure of an osteon, in the center you have a canal called the central canal. Okay, so this is the central canal, and blood vessels and nerves pass through the central canal. You know that bones are vascular, that means bones have blood vessels. So the blood vessels pass through the central canal. Okay, so you have artery, small branch of artery here, you have vein, you have nerves. So those structures are inside the central canal. So central canal has blood vessels, right? Blood vessels and nerves. Okay. Now we'll see around the central canal. Around the central canal, you have lacunae. You remember the lacunae, small cavities, so lacunae, and inside the lacunae you have the osteocytes, the bone cells. Osteo means bone, cyte means cell. So lacunae and osteocytes inside. Okay, and if you see, let's make it larger. So this is an osteon, central canal, and the lacunae. Okay, and the osteocyte. Osteocytes have processes like this. So osteocyte looks like, a spider, a tiny insect like this. So osteocyte inside the lacunae. Okay, and the central canal is connected to the lacunae by thin channels, very thin channels. And why you have those channels? Because from the blood, nutrients and oxygen rich fluid will go to the lacunae, because you have the artery blood vessels here, right? So from here the nutrients and oxygen will go to the lacunae. Also lacunae are connected to each other by fine channels. So from one lacunae to another lacunae the fluid can move. And why it is important, that osteocytes, the bone cells, are located inside, right? So they need nutrition and oxygen because they are alive. So they get nutrients and oxygen through those fine channels, and these channels are called canaliculi. Canaliculi. Okay, so that is the structure of a compact bone, and bone belongs to the connective tissue. Fluid type connective tissue is the blood. So blood is also a connective tissue. We say special type of connective tissue because it is in liquid form and it can circulate or move. If you see the blood under the microscope, you'll see two things: cells and plasma. Plasma is the liquid part of the blood and cells are the solid part. Okay, so those are the two parts. Now there are three different types of cells in the blood. Most of the cells are red blood cells, RBC. So you see here most of these cells are the red blood cells, and highest number of cells are the red blood cells. Okay, and you will also find the white blood cells, or WBC, also called leukocytes. White blood cells are different types. Lymphocyte is one type, neutrophil is another type. There are three more types of white blood cells. So these purple cells are the white blood cells, and inside the cell, a deep purple color structure is the nucleus. Okay, so this is the nucleus here, and this is the white blood cell. Okay, and small cells are called the platelets here. So another type of cells are platelets. Okay, so those are three types of cells you will see in the blood tissue, and the liquid is the plasma. Okay, blood is very important because it transports most of the chemicals in your body from one place to another. Okay, so that's all about the connective tissue. Now we'll talk about the nervous tissue. Nervous tissue forms the brain, spinal cord, and the nerves. You have one brain, one spinal cord, and many nerves throughout the body. Those structures are formed by the neural tissue or nervous tissue. Neural or nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is highly sensitive and delicate. That's why the brain and the spinal cord are heavily protected by the bones. In the neural tissue, you will see two types of cells. The main cells are the neurons. So neurons are the main cells, and supporting cells are neuroglias. Supporting. Okay. So these are two types of cells found in the neural tissue. And if you see the neural tissue, you will see the neurons. So these are the neurons, and neurons have processes. This is cell body, of the neuron, and this long process is called the axon, and these short processes are called dendrites. Okay, so these are the neurons you'll see in the neural tissue nucleus inside the cell body. Okay, and you'll also see many nuclei of the glial cells. So these are the nuclei of the glial cells. Neuroglia, supporting cells. Okay, so that is how the neural tissue is made up. Now, neural tissue forms the structures, the brain, spinal cord, and you know that the nervous system controls the functions of your body. Two systems control the functions of the body, the nervous system and the endocrine. Those are the main systems control the functions. And nervous system is called the first acting. You already know about that. Why? Because the nerve signal transmission is electrical. So the nervous system transmits the signal from one place to another by electrical means. That means very fast. So it is a very powerful control system in your body. Okay, so the function of the nervous system is production or generation of electrical signal and also transmission. transmission. Okay, so generation and transmission of the electrical signal. Here you see the nervous tissue under the microscope. So this is a neuron cell body here, you see, and this is axon, and these are dendrites. Okay, so you see the neurons, the main cells, and you see these tiny structures. These are the nuclei of the supporting cells, neuroglia. Muscle tissue. Three types of muscle tissues are present in the body. Skeletal muscle is voluntary. That means you can control the skeletal muscles. And skeletal muscles are attached to the skeleton or bones. You already know about that. And they help to move the bones or body parts at the joints. So skeletal muscle is very important. Now, if you see the skeletal muscle under the microscope, you'll see the fibers are cylindrical and very long. So number one is, you'll see long cylindrical shaped fibers. Okay, fibers. So this is another fiber. Okay, and inside the muscle fiber you'll see lines called striations. So these are the striations, okay, inside the muscle fiber. So you'll see striations. Okay, another important feature is in each fiber you have multiple nuclei, and the nuclei are not in the center but attached to the membrane, cell membrane or membrane of the fiber. So we can say multiple peripherally located, not centrally, peripheral located nuclei. Okay, so these are the properties of the skeletal muscle, histological properties. That means under the microscope you'll see long cylindrical fibers. Inside the fibers you see here cylindrical fibers, and inside the fiber you have the striations, the lines, and you see nuclei, multiple nuclei in each fiber, and they are peripherally located. Cardiac muscle tissue, very highly specialized muscle tissue, only present in the heart, wall of the heart. And cardiac muscle tissue is involuntary. You cannot control. It works by itself, right? Heart is pumping 24 hours without listening you. You cannot stop it. So involuntary muscle tissue. And if you see the cardiac muscle tissue under the microscope, couple of things are similar to the skeletal. The fibers are cylindrical shaped fibers. So cylindrical fibers, and also striations are present inside the fibers. So these two things are same, skeletal and cardiac. Okay, cylindrical shaped fibers and striations. Cylindrical fibers and striations. Okay. However, the cardiac muscle tissue has some special properties or structures. One is very important: in between the fibers. So this is one fiber here, and this is another fiber, striations. So where two fibers are attached to each other, you have thick bands. So this is another fiber here. So you see that the fibers are attached to each other by these thick bands called the intercalated discs. So here you can see the intercalated discs. Okay, and another thing is that in case of cardiac muscle fiber, usually we see a single nucleus. In a skeletal, you remember multiple nuclei. In case of cardiac, usually single, sometimes we see two, but not more than that. Okay, and the last thing, sometimes you will see the fibers are connected to each other by branching. So branching, which we don't see in skeletal, and intercalated discs. Okay, so these are the things you'll see in the cardiac muscle tissue. Okay, smooth muscle. Smooth muscle fibers or cells are very simple. They are not cylindrical. They are spindle shaped. That means like your eye, and a nice centrally located nucleus. So very simple. Spindle shaped fibers or cells. In case of muscle tissue, one fiber is one cell. So each cell is a fiber. And let's draw more cells, nucleus, another cell, nucleus. So you see many spindle shaped fibers or cells are grouped together to form the smooth muscle tissue. Okay, so spindle shaped fiber and single centrally located nucleus. No striations, no intercalated disc, no branching, right? Very simple. Now, when you see the smooth muscle under the microscope, sometimes it is difficult to see the cell membrane or boundary, since many cells are together, packed together. So this is one smooth muscle fiber like this, another is like this. Okay, although it's difficult to see the borders. So smooth muscle is also involuntary. So only skeletal is voluntary, and they are attached to the bones to move the bones as you desire. Smooth muscle is found in the wall of the tube-like structures, right? I talked about that before, like arteries, intestine, your trachea, respiratory tract, right? And the wall of the hollow organs, like wall of the stomach, urinary bladder, uterus, gallbladder. So those are the structures where you will find the smooth muscle tissue. Okay, so that's all about 4 different types of tissues. Now we'll talk about the inflammation. Inflammation is the response of your tissue to injury. So response of the tissue to injury. Now, when injury occurs, you see some changes in that tissue, in that area. What are the changes you see? You all know. You see redness. You see swelling, right? You see edema, accumulation of fluid. You feel pain. So pain, redness, swelling, edema, those are the signs of inflammation, right? You all know that. Why that happens? Why those changes you see? Let me draw a tissue. You know, tissue is a collection of many similar cells. So this is a tissue. Okay. Now, you know that in the tissue, everywhere you have the capillaries, blood capillaries, right? So the blood capillary here, okay? And also in the tissue, you have what? You have the nerves. So you have nerves, nerve endings, okay? So capillary and nerve endings. Okay, so when injury occurs in the tissue, what happens? Some chemicals are released. So injury releases certain chemicals, okay, in that area. Important chemicals that are released are histamine, bradykinin, bradykinin and prostaglandin. There are different types of prostaglandins. Shortcut we say PG 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are the chemicals, main chemicals. Also more chemicals are released: histamine, bradykinin, prostaglandin. And these chemicals make some changes in the wall of the capillaries. What happens when the chemicals are released in the wall of the capillary? You have tiny pores, from the blood, nutrients and other chemicals enter into the tissue. So this is the tissue outside of the capillary, right? So there are small pores in the wall of the capillary. However, these chemicals open the pores more. So the pores in the capillary wall gets bigger, okay? And also the capillaries get wider. That is called vasodilation. So two things happen in the capillaries. One is vasodilation, that means the capillaries get wider. So if the capillaries get wider by the action of the chemicals, then more blood will flow in that area. Makes sense? And that is number one, and that causes redness. Just think that if in this tissue more blood circulates, then that area will look red because blood is red. So that will give the redness in that area, vasodilation. And also what happens, the pores or channels in the wall get bigger. So fluid leaks out, comes out through the pores easily. So fluid will accumulate in the tissue, and that causes edema and swelling. Makes sense, right? Edema and swelling. Okay, and pain occurs due to the stimulation of the nerve endings here. So the nerve endings are stimulated by the chemicals, especially the prostaglandins stimulate the nerves, and that causes pain. Okay, so that's how the changes occur at the site of inflammation. Now after the inflammation, some cells die or tissue dies, and how the healing takes place after the inflammation. So first what happens, you see here the tissue. Let me draw here. So this is the area where the tissue death has occurred. So first this space or gap will be filled by collagen fibers. Who will produce the collagen fibers? The fibroblasts. Okay, so fibroblasts produce collagen fibers, and that will fill the gap. Okay, so the filling action is done by the fibroblasts. Okay, and then macrophages. Macrophages are phagocytic cells. You have macrophages everywhere in the body, in the tissue. So we'll do phagocytosis. 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 Why phagocytosis is needed? Because the dead cells and debris, dead tissue should be removed. So that is the cleaning part. Okay, so cleaning is done by macrophages, the phagocytic cells. They will remove the debris and dead cells, dead tissue. So filling by fibroblasts, cleaning by macrophages, and then branching. Next is from the adjacent blood vessels, branches will enter into that newly formed tissue, because tissue needs blood supply, right? So from the adjacent blood vessels, branching will be produced and branches will enter into the tissue. So that is branching of the blood vessels. And the last thing is this surface, outer surface, should be covered by epithelial tissue. You know, epithelial tissue has high rate of regeneration, can quickly be reproduced. So the epithelial tissue will just cover that area. So that is covering. So easy way to remember: filling by the collagen fibers, cleaning by the phagocytic cells, macrophages, branching from the adjacent blood vessels, and covering by the epithelial tissue. So that's how the healing takes place. You can see here, these are the collagen fibers formed by these fibroblasts here, and phagocytic cells will do the cleaning part, right? And blood vessels will form new blood vessels, and this will be covered finally by the epithelial tissue. Okay. So those are the things you need to know from the tissue.